On the question of the level playing field, are you aware of any disagreements between the UK and the EU over the TCA's level playing commitments, perhaps consequent on proposed new laws or policies that either side is pursuing? And can you think of any UK proposals that could be problematic? And I want to ask you a more general question, which is the extent to which you believe that there is a genuine playing field, or ever has been a genuine playing field in Europe. I'd be interested to know what you think. When I say Europe, I mean the European Union, of course. So if I may start, first of all, with Shanker, and then Professor Bartels, and then Sam. Thank you very much indeed. So Shanker, off to you.
Yeah, I think just to address your initial question, or rather your general question first. I think with regard to regulation and the impact of trade agreements on regulation, I think we have to be clear. First of all, historically, trade agreements have not tended to deal too closely with matters of domestic regulation. That is starting to change, and more trade agreements are starting to look at non-tariff barriers to trade, and particularly domestic regulations on the basis that they may damage national treatment or be discriminatory. What is interesting about the level playing field obligations of the UK-EU TCA is that it goes a little bit further than that in terms of impact on regulation, but does so by focusing on whether the regulatory system or the regulatory change is damaging to trade or is distortive of trade or investment. In other words, focusing on market distortions, which is very much what the modern trading system is grappling with now anyway. And so there isn't an intention, I think, in any trade agreement to sort of intervene in a country's domestic regulatory choices, except where those choices, in the case of the EU-UK TCA, are distortive, and in other agreements where they confer a trade or competition advantage. And so we need to look at that regulation and say, well, is it distortive? Is it damaging to competition? And I would imagine that most UK regulatory choices going forward would seek to be the least trade restrictive and the least damaging to competition, consistent with a clear and publicly stated regulatory goal. So I wouldn't imagine that UK regulation that is not damaging to competition and trade, I would think that would pass muster under the TCA provisions. Now, the two parties may take different views on this, and it will be interesting to see the cases that Professor Bartels, will, amongst others, will be adjudicating on this, because one view, which may be the view the EU takes, is that any regulatory difference is sort of automatically distortive in that sense. I think the UK would take a very different view of that, focusing more on the distortionary effect and the sort of the economic effects of that regulation. So I think we can't say for certain how this will be interpreted in terms of the impact on UK regulation. But I think the intention of the level playing field obligations is to focus on impact on trade and investment competition, essentially.